Hello, I'm Louise Jackson, and I would like to teach you to paint using watercolors or acrylics. If you join me as an art class member at louisejacksonpaintingclasses.com, I will teach you to paint beautiful flowers, landscapes, still lifes, and possibly even some portraits. Today I'd like to share with you a free painting tutorial. I'm going to show you how to paint a simple tulip using watercolors or acrylics. And in the video, I will paint the tulip from start to finish so that you can paint right along with me. You will begin by tracing a line drawing of a tulip onto a 9x11 piece of watercolor paper, and you will use the drawing as a guide as you paint. Every time you join me in one of my painting classes, you will be supplied with a line drawing that I've created for you, and this technique makes even my more elaborate designs doable for any level of painter. So you don't need any drawing skills to learn to paint. Today's painting is quite simple. It's perfect for a beginner, but even more advanced painters can learn something about my blending techniques by doing this. So let's start painting this pretty little tulip. I chose to use pink tones when painting my tulip, but you might prefer different colors. I have just a little sample of different colors that you can use. There's Winsor Violet light, and then you can use the Winsor Violet for the shading on them, which is just a darker value. And to get a darker value, you simply use less water in your brush. Okay, and that makes it darker when you apply it. And here I've got bright opera and some red violet for shading. Here I've got permanent rose and permanent rose for shading. And here, if you prefer orange, I've used a vermilion and then a little red violet and vermilion mixed for a nice shading in the orange flower. This one is red violet, both for the dark and the light. And I've put my colors on a very small palette just so you can see the colors that I'm using and where I'm going with them. I'm going to start on this petal over here, and I'm going to put a wash of my brightest color, lightest color on there, which is bright opera, and I'm going to put it on very light, but I want it to be wetting my paper at the same time, so that's why I have a lot of water with it. Now I could pre-wet the paper and then put this on, but this way I can do two steps in one. And I've got it pretty wet, and you see where it's puddled, it's darker, so I'm going to just kind of soak up that puddle a little bit so I don't have that left there. It's more even now. And then I'm going to pick up some red violet, and my red violet is much darker, and I'm going to use it along this area, and it will become the shading from this petal. And then I'm also going to put some down the outer edge, and then that will help that petal roll under. I'm going to pick up a little bit more and continue up here, and this helps define this petal. And then when I come to this edge, I'm not going to have it be very dark, but I am going to pull a little bit of dark up at the base. All right, now what I want to do is take my brush, clean it out in my dirty water, pick up clean water, set it on my paper towel until all the water is out of it, just as if I towel dried my hair. And then I'm going to spread it out and use that as my blending brush. I'm going to give it a little curve and pull downward, and I usually direct my pulling strokes toward the stem. That way, if it creates any growth lines, they are going toward the stem, which is where they should be going. Okay. That's given me a nice value change, and it's also left the center a little bit light, and I'm going to just let it sit there for a few minutes and it will dry. Now I'm going to jump over here to the other side, and I'm going to switch to a little smaller brush. When I get into a smaller area, I want a smaller brush, and this is about 6 round, and I use this often. I don't have use for a lot of brushes, but I do use a 6 round and 16 round often, and then about a 20 flat. Okay, so I'm just wetting with that and trying to stay in my lines. And then I'm going to take the water out of that brush. I don't even need to clean it because I'm in the same family and I'm going into darker color now. So I'm just taking it off my brush on my paper towel. And then what I want to do is come in here and paint some dark right in that area and pull it up. And while I have it on my brush, I'll put a little bit up here, just that little shape, and then I will rinse the brush, put it on my paper towels, spread it out just like I did the larger one. This becomes so automatic that I don't even think about it, except when I'm trying to explain it to you. Okay, and then I'm going to clean it and repeat the same concept and stretch it out. When I start to pick up the color, my brush will go back to a point, and that's how I know it's time to wipe that off and reshape the brush a little bit. Okay. I like the fact that there's some light areas in here. If I want more light, I can come back with just a thirsty brush and lift some of that color off because it's still nice and wet. Then I'm going to flip it around because I always like to aim my brush where I want a really crisp or straight line. So I'll aim it out here, put a little color there, and I'll put just a little color there. And then I will prepare it for blending. Again, rinse it out, wipe it, take the extra water out of it, and come in here and use it to blend with. Now, a lot of watercolors do not blend, and they just put their color on and let the water blend it, and that's fine. That's a style, and if you like it, great. This is just the way I work. I like it a little smoother. I don't like to see too many transition lines, but I always need value changes. Okay, and that one, I can't paint this right now because this is wet. I can't paint this because this is wet. So I need to go find another area to work in. Now, if this is dry, which it seems to be, then I can work on this petal. Okay, it seems to be pretty dry, and I don't like to risk it. So what I can do is come down, I could work on a leaf. So if you feel that's too damp, then go ahead and work on a leaf, and I will show you how to do that. The color that I use for my leaves is a pre-mixed color. It comes in the tube this way. It's called Shadow Green, and Mission Gold is the name of the brand, and the only one that I know of that is mixed in a tube that I don't have to alter or I don't have to mix. But if you don't have it, if you mix ultramarine blue and yellow, it will come close. If you have Winsor Newton's paint, Indian Threne blue, and transparent yellow, mix perfectly to this. If your blue and yellow are too strong, if it's too bright, all you have to do is add a little bit of red into it, and you'll get right here. What I'm doing is I'm using my flat brush, and I'm going to take this right down to the edge of the paper. That way, if I decide I want to put a mat on it, I don't have to worry about where this is going to, it will cover it. Okay, so I've left some spaces, and then I'm going to take my flat brush and take the water out of it. I'm going to leave a little bit of water in it. So it's not quite a dry brush, but it's got just enough water so it'll make this paint move, because I didn't pre-wet the leaf. I'm painting on dry paper. So whenever you wet your paper, you don't want to add water back into it unless you want it to flood out of the way. But if you're on dry paper, you can add a little water back into it to move it. Does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, I'm going to probably come back and darken under there a little bit later. But I've done some, a little bit of busy work out here on this while my paper is drying here. So now I can go back and complete that petal. And I'm going to repeat what I did before. I'm going to wet it with my light value, which in this case is the bright opera. And you will use whatever light color you have chosen. If you are an acrylic painter, this works exactly the same way. Just find colors that might be similar, or colors that fall within the range of choices I showed you. And working on watercolor paper with acrylics is really fun, because if you already own a lot of acrylics and don't want to invest in watercolors, learn to use your acrylics first. Several of my books were published by an acrylic company, and what I used to do was I would paint some of the pieces in watercolor and give you the conversion colors, and I would paint some in acrylics and give you the watercolor conversion colors. Now, I got to the point where I couldn't even tell the difference. And I know they work the same because I did it for so long. And I encourage you to try it. Okay, now this is just pulling the transition line down. Now here's what I mean by transition line. When you put a color into a wet area, if you leave that color like, now I can't see my water, but if you leave that color just like that, that edge is going to soften a little bit. This edge is what I'm talking about. But if you don't do anything to it, it won't soften much more than that. But if you do pull it out, then you'll get rid of the transition line. This is the transition line, okay? Sometimes you make another one. And the reason I made this one is because my water stopped there. Okay, so I got rid of the transition line. All right, now I also have some little smudges here, and I normally wouldn't bother with them because they're going to get some dark paint. But if I wanted to, I could take a soft brush and come in like that and just use water and just diminish the smudges. They don't always go all the way disappearing, but you can see that you can get rid of them a lot. So if you get something outside your lines, that's an easy way to clean them up. I have a special brush for that, but really any worn down synthetic will do. Okay. All right, so now I need to let that area dry because I just put more water on there. And what happens is I went over this edge. So if I go in and put a real dark value on there, it's going to bleed wherever the water is. So these are just little different things that if you are a beginner watercolorist, kind of some of the rules you need to know, that wherever the water goes, that's where your paint's going to go. So if you don't want paint to go there, don't put water there, okay? All right, now I'm going to jump back to this little petal. And this little petal is part of this one. The outer edge is the connecting part. And then this top edge is the part that would be the lightest. So I'm going to put a little bit of my light pink on here just to wet it. But I can leave the top edge with only white paint. And then I can come in and just merge that little bit of pink into the white. But focus on leaving the white up there. And it'll just create a nice highlight. Now I turned it upside down because remember I said I always want to be aiming my brush toward the outer edge. Then I'm going to take a little bit of red violet. I'm not going to make it extremely dark and dry this time because I don't want to get too much on here. But I'm going to come along this back edge. I don't want to have so much dark on here that it covers that whole petal. I just want it to be the shading at the bottom of it. And then I'll come in with my brush that has most of the water out of it. And then I'll just splay it out where it'll fit. Yeah, as it gets wider, you can spread it out a little bit. And that creates a nice soft blend and leaves a nice sharp white edge on there. I don't know if you can see it, but I dropped a drop of water right here off the ferrule of my brush, and I'm going to soak it up with my brush, and then I'll take a paper towel or a piece of paper towel and I'll blot it just so it doesn't get in my way and I get in trouble again. Here's how to prevent it from happening. When you go into your water and you go real deep, you'll be taking the water off of your brush, the bristles, but I don't know if you can see that, but there's still a drip there. So when I turn my brush down and I'm painting, it's going to fall right in where I don't want it. So I try to make it a habit to look at the ferrule, and then you'll see me just roll the ferrule on the edge of my paper towels just when I see a drip so I can catch it and prevent it from running down on my piece, okay? So far, so good. This is all one petal. It's got a nice light edge. It's got good strong darks in it. Remember, I put the dark here. I put a little dark there. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to do this center piece. And I think everything is dry enough so I can go right to it. Okay, I'm going to wet it with my larger brush this time. Larger area requires a larger brush. Just makes it easier for you. Why would you struggle with so many strokes putting everything on with a tiny little brush in a big area? It does not make sense. Okay, I want to get some pink here. That will be my base. And as I come over here, I want to have more white paper showing. So what I'm going to do is clean my brush off, pick up clean water, and just have some water here and just pull that pink around. I want to keep it very light in that area. Okay, my light source is going to be evident if I keep one area lighter. Okay, and I'm going to come in from the bottom of this and do the same thing. I'll be pulling the pink around, but I will leave some white. Clean off your brush and lose your transition line. Okay, leave a little white there. I may change my mind and make it all pink later, but at least I've got that option now. All right, now what I'm going to do is pick up my violet, my red violet, and I'm going to put some of it up here at the outer edge, some on this side, and I'll leave the center of it. Okay, let me do this so I don't keep flipping the paper and making you dizzy. I just have it in two spots. I'm going to splay out my brush or spread it out. use the end of it to remove the transition line. I don't want to cover all my white, so I'm going to try not to get it all the way down there. And then I'm going to come back from the other side, clean the brush out again. Make sure you just have water in it, and come back in this way. And then I can lift that transition line and keep a nice strong light area there. If I start to pick up paint on my brush, then I need to clean it off again. And you can play back and forth with this as long as it's wet. Okay, I've made another transition line here, so I'm going to work that up. Okay, that's good. Now I want to come in from the bottom. Now, if this is too much for you, and you feel like, oh, this is too dry to work on, then let it dry and go back in after it is bone dry, and go back in and re-wet it with water and continue on with your color. Now, I think I can work mine without getting into too much trouble. But sometimes when I'm talking and explaining something, it takes me longer, and then I do get into trouble because I run out of blending time. Okay, I want to put a fairly good amount of paint down here. Okay. I want it pretty strong and dark, and it's going to be a challenge to keep it away from that turning the white pink, but I will probably end up lifting it, and that's a good thing for you to see. So if I push back down into it, that pushes it out of the way a little bit, but I have to keep remembering to clean my brush when I do that. Okay. It softens it, and I'm to the point where I think I can go up with it now. Yeah, that's not bad. Okay, very nice. Takes a little bit of practice, but doesn't everything. First time you do something, it's not always perfect. And for me, I can do it 1,000 times and it's not always perfect. But I guess that's why I keep doing it, because it's a challenge. I have favorites, but I have nothing perfect. Everything I have has something in it that could be changed or could be improved on. Now this is, I'm going to wait till this dries to see, but at this moment, this appears a little too light for me. I like this darkness over here, so I'll probably look at it after it dries a bit, after this dries, and then I'll reassess it and wet it and strengthen that dark. Okay, for now, we're going to continue on with this leaf. And whatever green you are using, just pick up some of it and put it up along the top edge. And you might want to use your flat brush to get it started like so. Okay, I'm leaving a little space here, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, I don't necessarily want this real dark, so what I'm doing is using a little more water with it. And that's how you can control the value of your colors, is more water will make it lighter, less water makes it darker. Pretty simple. Painting is quite logical, and once you give yourself permission to do the learning, what I mean is I had written some oil painting books when I decided I wanted to go back to watercolor. Watercolor was where I started, but I really didn't learn very much, and I moved. And then I went into oils. So I had written several oil painting books, and when I went into back into watercolor, I had to give myself permission to be a beginner again until I learned how to handle the medium. And once I learned how to handle the medium, then everything that I knew from my oil painting life came into play with watercolors. You know, how to make something round is the same no matter what medium you're working in. Your values are the same. There's just so much of it is translatable. Now I'm going to turn this corner by putting a little more green on here and leaving that white there. It just kind of gives you a value change. And if it doesn't work for you, if you've got it so it's all the same value, then simply pick up a little bit more of your green. It's a little too dark. And come back in with a darker value of green right in here. And then stretch it out or chisel it out, and it will make it look like it's turning. Okay? It's all about value. You can have a great painting in black and white if you can do the values right. If you're trying to do something with just color and no value changes, it doesn't work as well. I'm not saying it doesn't work, because some abstracts can work, but even they need a focal area. So if they don't do their focal area with value, then they have to do it with brightness or brilliance, whatever. Okay, we're going to take the stem, and I want to make it darker on the left side. So I'm going down that side with pretty strong green. Then I'm going to pick up some water and soften the inner edge with that. Now there's two ways that I like to do the stems, and this is probably the more challenging way, but I'll show you both ways. Okay. And just work, I've just got enough green on my brush to just work a little bit of it over there, and then I'll just deepen this a little bit. I want the back to be the darker side though. I've had a drip on my ferrule. Okay. The other way is to do this. Paint your stem like so, and then lift out. Take a thirsty brush and then lift through the center of it, and it'll kind of blend itself. Color will run back. See, so that's always an option. All right, then I've got this part of the leaf to paint, and there always seems to be just a tiny little part that looks a little unconnected, so I'm just going to go in and fill that in, maybe put a little more dark in there. It's not very dark, it's more of a medium value. I don't want to lose my light. Okay, that's good. There's some greens in acrylics that are on the market that work pretty well straight out of the container. I think Plaid still has Hauser green. That's the darkest one is pretty dark and dull, and that looks pretty nice. For the most part, and I'm not familiar with all of the colors anymore because they change often. The companies change their colors quite often in acrylics. But I do know that, as I said before, any strong blue and yellow and a little red will make a nice toned down green. Another favorite of mine is Winsor Newton's Burnt Sienna and Antwerp Blue. Beautiful greens. and the Winsor Newton Indanthrene blue and transparent yellow. Practice using and creating greens, and I do this all the time. I've painted over 50 years and I still do this. It's worth the effort. It's worth the time to take the time to work it out on a scrap of paper before putting it on your final painting and not being happy with it. Okay, I'm going to use my large brush and come up here just because I can do it. But if you are not comfortable with it, then use your little round brush, put the paint on, and just then go to the large flat and lift a streak or two out of it, okay? Everybody that paints has their favorite brushes, and what I made myself do was learn how to do everything with just a few brushes, so I didn't have to buy them all. Whenever I took a seminar, I would try and work with what I had first. If I couldn't do it, then I'd buy the brush. But if I could, I didn't have to, because then I would have to go home and convince my students they needed another brush. Not always easy. They already had many, many. Okay, I like that. Now, if I wanted to add a little more, a little yellow and brighten it up a little bit, I could in here. In this case, I'm not going to because I have no background on here. If I had a background on here, I think I might. But one thing I just noticed, and I will change it on your drawing, is that this stem needs to be coming down to about here. So that means that this leaf needs to become a little wider to work down here. So I will draw it on your drawing so it's a little wider. That makes more sense. It doesn't look like it's floating in the air up there. I have lots of tulip paintings and lots of single tulip designs, and I will show you a couple just so you can see how the different colors work. I love tulips because they're so easy to do, and I want to do this one to show you how to darken it. I'm just going to re-wet that petal, and now that I know it's totally bone dry, I can do this. How many times can I do it? As many times as I want. I can do it until I make mud out of it. I don't want to do that, but as long as you let it dry in between each layer, you can come back and layer and layer and layer. And that's what layerists do, and I am a layerist. Okay. Nice and strong and dark. I want to get this. I maybe should have used my large brush on it, but I'm going to try it with a small one. Remember that it's all dry underneath, so I'm blending onto dry paper. I could have re-wet it. Yes, I could have, but I didn't. Okay, I kind of like that. It's giving it an extra little curve or bump there. I like that. When I pull back, I'm not carrying any paint on my brush. Oh, I like that. Okay. I might come down here and do another one. How's that? I like that. Okay, then this looks a little bit boring. So, let's see what we can do here. I think what I'll do here is I keep getting a drip. I'm going to wet this side, and I'm not going to touch that area. Now I'm going on and on because I could have stopped before I did that, but I want you to see how I would play with it. Okay. I didn't bring it all the way to that one, and I may do that after this is dry. I may not. I'll take a look at it. Remember that what you're seeing at this moment is not what it's going to look like when it's dry. Sorry, that probably made you dizzy. Because it looks pretty bright. It looks like a hot pink right now. But when it dries, it's going to dry duller. I promise I won't do that again. This is a learning experience for me too, doing the videos, and I have learned a lot, and we have spent many hours figuring out equipment and what to do and what not to do, and I'm still learning. Okay, I re-wet that stem, and I'm going to show you how to darken it. It went a little bit light on me and kind of created an outline. So I'm just going to put a little more paint into the water. And remember, it was totally dry. Then I'm going to take my thirsty brush that's fanned out and move that pigment in a little bit further so it is not just an outline. Okay? I'm widening that bottom area, not intentionally, just because I smudged it. I'm real interested in teaching you ways to fix watercolors, because when I first started watercolors, if you couldn't do a great watercolor in an hour and a half and keep it totally transparent, you might as well throw yourself off a cliff. And that's a long time ago. Today, watercolors do everything. They use as many tricks as they can to make things work. I got one more thing to do on here, and that's why it's more fun. I mean, they use gold leaf, they use so many things that have been created from the scrapbooking industry and the craft industry, and the paintings are fun, and there is still a reverence for transparent paintings, and that's wonderful. I'm going to make a line down here and curve it, and then I'm going to come in and put in a little bit of red violet and the competitions in watercolor groups often list if they will only allow transparent paintings, but there's not too many of them that do that anymore. And a lot of watercolors combine acrylics as well, and that works fine. Do you see what I did? I just wanted to create that little dent in there. And again, there's several ways to do that, but I just wet it down to about here and then put a little paint there and pulled it down. And I think I am finished. I hope you enjoyed painting this little tulip with me, and perhaps you learned a little bit about my blending techniques and my teaching techniques. If you join my art class membership, you'll learn many fun painting techniques. For instance, I'll teach you how to create colorful borders that you can use without a mat, and therefore you don't have to purchase a mat. Each month you're a member, you'll be able to choose a new painting from my video library. Along with each video, you'll receive a complimentary instruction packet for a second painting that will use similar techniques. I hope you stop by LouiseJacksonPaintingClasses.com to check it out.